other words, God has got it. He has got a plan. He knows what he's doing. Don't worry. And yet we still freak out and worry. It's because when we're in a certain season and we're going through something, it's tough to see that hope that exists there. It'd be like if the only time you ever came to Wisconsin was in February and March. Right? I mean, it is the ugliest state. It's all brown and mushy and gross, and the weather's just weird and just right. But also, if the only time you ever come is in July, you think it's green all the time, it's beautiful, because it's just sort of what our experience is. So for those of us who are Wisconsinites, even though we will ask ourselves many times a year, Lord, why am I here? We remember when all of a sudden summer comes around. Now, we never know how long summer's going to be or when it's going to be, right? Sometimes it's the most beautiful week of the year. But it comes, and we love it, and it's great. And so we kind of have this hope. We know that it's coming. There's sort of this season that moves on. But see, what happens is in life, we tend to view our future through our past. We look at what we've been through, and then that's the lens of what we see things moving forward. The psychologists call it heuristic thinking. It's where you've had some experience. Maybe you're in a relationship and it did not end well. The next one you get into, what are you? You're a little cautious. You know, if you've been to a church before and really been hurt, it can be tough finding another church. Why? Because you've been hurt. Sometimes your faith, you were trusting God for something, it didn't happen, you don't understand it. We hit these wounds, and it will sometimes then kind of cloud our vision for the future. And so what we're doing is we're going through Romans right now, and Paul's about to sort of finish in chapter 11 is where we are. He's about to finish sort of this talk that he's hitting. He started in chapter 9, and he's explaining, God's covenant with the Israelites. Because if you read through the Old Testament and you look at the story of God, who are God's people? The Israelites. But then for these people, at the time they're reading this, early Christianity, who are the people trying to kill them and stop them? The Israelites. So it's kind of like, huh? You'd look at that and you'd think, well, so God's given up on these guys? What's going on? And they had some questions as Paul is answering this. And so what we're going to see here, as he explains in chapter 11, a little bit of what that out of Isaiah that we read of, like, God's God, he's got it. He has a plan. And he's not given up on anyone. And it's a good thing for us to remember. It's a good thing to really understand that about God, because sometimes we go through experiences and we get little smudge and things on our glasses, our theological lens, and then sometimes we struggle to understand God. And so it's good to have a good, healthy theology. So hopefully this is helpful today for you guys as we look through this. So let's start right at the beginning here, Romans 11:1. I'll go through a section and then we'll chat about it. In this first section, I'll just read it first. He says this. This is Paul saying. He says, "I ask then, did God reject his people?" Right? We know kind of the question of the Israelites. He responds, "By no means." He says, "I'm an Israelite myself, a descendant of Abraham from the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people, whom he foreknew. Don't you know what Scripture says in the passage about Elijah? How he appealed to God against Israel. Now, Elijah also went through a time where he thought maybe he was the only one that loved God, the only one righteous. Same thing. They're trying to kill him, trying to stop him. And it says that he cries out there in verse 3, "Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars. I am the only one left, and they are trying to kill me." And Paul says, and what does God answer to him? God says, "I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. And if by grace, then it cannot be based off of works. If it were, grace would no longer be grace. What then? What the people of Israel sought so earnestly, they did not obtain. Now the elect among them did, but others were hardened, as it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that could not see and ears that could not hear, to this very day. And David says, may their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. May their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and their backs be bent forever." So Paul begins this by asking, so then did God reject his people? I mean, look at where the move of God is. The Messiah came. They rejected him. Look at the people who are coming to faith. It's overwhelmingly, in large numbers, Gentiles, those outside of Israel. It would seem that God has turned his back on his people and is moving somewhere else. But he says, no. No. He uses himself as an example. And he says, look at me. I was one of those guys. I was out there trying to kill Christians and stop them. And he came and he turned my heart to turn him into the apostle to the Gentiles. He's like, so God did not give up. And then that's when he goes back and reminds them. Remember the story of Elijah? Because they knew. He thought he was it. He didn't see anyone else. He felt alone. God has left this place. God's like, no, don't worry. I still got a plan. I still got 7,000. You know, you ever wish that God would sometimes clue you into his plan? Right? It's like he's doing something, but you can't see it. It's kind of like, what's going on? And Paul's using that as an analogy of like, even now it might seem, but he has a history. God has a history of he does not give up on his people, and he has not given up on them now. You know, N.T. Wright, I love his view on Romans in there, and he talks about how this remnant that God has now, and when he has remnants, it's not a sign that he's given up on everyone else. It's a sign that he's remaining faithful, and he will work even through this small bit that he has left to redeem the others. His whole plan is to redeem everyone. So you see this kind of hardening of the heart that Paul talks about. It's just a temporary state that he's talking about here as he goes on and explains. But one of the things that, you know, when you read through that, one of the things that's just practical for us to remember is there are times and there are things that we've gone through where it seems like God has left it, where it seems like God is no longer there. Relationships, work things, whatever it is, where it seems like nothing's going right, he's not here. Because we think if he was here and he did care, it'd be rainbows and lollipops and everything else. Now, where God is and when he gets involved, his desire is to bless you, okay? But yet there's times we're still stuck in this. It's like, listen, for people in Wisconsin, we should really kind of understand the spot that we're in. Because we have a hope, but yet sometimes we still have to go through February and March. And you ever gone south in February and March? They get spring. Spring is a season, if you've only lived in Wisconsin, you do not understand it. Because spring here is just kind of just mud, sort of turns into rain, and then all of a sudden it's summer. Like they have spring, things bloom, and it's wonderful. It starts warming up, you know. It's like, ooh, yeah, December and half of January are really tough. That was a long winter. And then they move on, but not for us. Us hardcore up here. We're hanging on, right? And sometimes it seems like it's going a little long, and it seems like it's just about to break through, right? Like it's supposed to be, 60-something tomorrow? How many of in here would you be shocked if there was still another snowstorm or two on the books? Nobody. None of us. We sort of are looking for it. This is just life. This is where we're at now of God has come. Jesus came. He made a way for us to be made righteous so we can live with him in eternity, but we're not quite there yet. This is part of what we talk about on Ash Wednesday. You know, it's kind of a time to remind us, like, yeah, we still need repentance, and from dust we came, and one day from dust we shall return if the Lord tarries. None of us get out of this alive. But yet we have eternity and this hope to look forward to. We can't see it now, but we know that it's coming. And so sometimes we sit and we look at things and it seems like God's not there. And listen, if something's difficult, you know, yes, cry out to God. You know, I hit on it a little bit last week, sort of talking about Lent as we enter into the Lenten season. Sometimes it's good to lament in Lent. And that's just a thing where there's something in your life, something not going on. You can be honest with God. He's God. He can handle it. You think, well, if I question something or I said, God, where are you in this? And if I feel like I have no faith, then I'm a failure. No. The very fact that you're still talking to God shows you have faith. You see it in the Psalms. God, where are you? My enemies are surrounding me. Where are you? I've seen you do amazing things. I know you have the best for me, but why does it stink now? And you can lean into that, embrace that, and you can actually find God and feel peace in that lament. And it can be a healthy thing to do. So here Paul's talking about this analogy. It seems like here are the chosen people of God who he's going to bring his Messiah from. He brings them, and now they're trying to kill all of them. So God must not be there. No. He's still there. He goes on to explain this further in verse 11. He says, again, I asked, did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? I mean, look how far gone they seem. He says, not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. But if their transgression means riches for the world and their loss means riches for the Gentiles, how much greater riches will be when their full inclusion comes? And he says, I'm talking to you, Gentiles. That's most of us in here. He said, inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, I take pride in my ministry, in the hope that I may somehow arouse my own people, the Jewish people, to envy and to save some of them. For if their rejection brought reconciliation to the whole world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the part of the dough offered as first fruits is holy, then the whole batch is holy. If the root is holy, so are the branches. In other words, God's called them holy. They're not acting like it. They're rejecting. But he's like, I don't go and call something unholy. And listen, this is something I hope the church here, that as Christians, we try to embrace that same mentality. Because there is no group of people who are so good at attacking the church than its own people. Right? Someone messes up. Someone does something. It's like, burn the witch, you know. It's like, we just want to string them up, make them pay. Or you're at a church somewhere and something happens to you and you get hurt. God left this church. I need to go somewhere where God really is. And he's sitting there going, okay. If he has not abandoned the people at this time when he's writing this, who are actively trying to kill his followers, do you think maybe that Christian you know, that church hurt that you carry with you, that maybe God still is there and still loves them? That'll mess with you how you treat people, right? Because we as Christians, the way that we kind of say it's okay to be mean is by us thinking we stand on the side of holiness and righteousness. I am right, I am holy, you are not, so let me light you on fire. Tell you what's wrong with you. Even though we read and we're a part of this story where it's very clear how God views his people, even though he's been very clear to us about how we're supposed to treat other people, we're supposed to love them. And he says, leave the vengeance to me, leave the judgment to me. I got it, thanks. But, we think he's just not getting it sometimes. We got to help him out a little bit. Let me tell you what's wrong with you, brother. Let me tell you, sister, what's wrong with you going around dressed like that. I tell you what. And we get mean and we got nasty. Please, let us not be like that. Let us have a bit more humility. And think of it this way. Paul's going to go and explain how especially us as Gentiles should have some humility. He's going to go and use this analogy of grafting in things. He's like, this root that he's talking about, you aren't even all from it. And what's God's response to you? Let's read it. Verse 17, if some of the branches have broken off of this vine he's talking about, and you, though a wild olive shoot, in other words, you won't even come from this tree, you have been grafted in among the others, and now share in that nourishing sap from the olive root. Do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. That's tough, man, because I'm an American. Right? We get this kind of America kind of attitude, and we kind of hit that. I shouldn't have said that, because then people think I'm trying to make a political thing. I'm not. What I'm saying is this is everyone. Inside of us, we feel a certain way, we think a certain way, and we're right, and let me tell you how all the rest of you are wrong. Just listen to me. It is the reason you cannot go into any comment section on any social media platform and find kindness and love and support. You find the opposite. I don't care what it is. I love it. I'm on Facebook just inviting people to church, and I think it's hilarious. Some of just mean people that jump on there. I just invite people to church. I don't understand how it. Sometimes you can tell people are really hurt. There's some lady yelling at some guy named Dwight on the things. I don't even know who Dwight is. Like, that poor dude's getting beat up in my comment section somehow. Lord bless Dwight wherever he is. Give him grace. Because there's this thing inside of us. We just want to get it, and we feel right, and we kind of think that it's just Jesus and me, and if the church ticks you off, then that's the church, that God has left the church, and those people aren't right, and I don't need any of them, even though you cannot get away from the fact that God is not just reconciling us to himself, he's reconciling us to each other. It's so clear in there. But if there's something we don't like, it's like we don't know how do we talk things through? How do we be sane and normal, right? This is why I love the creed. It's like, we agree on this stuff. And most Christians can't say, okay, let's plant our flag there. If I start getting in, well, this is how you pray, and this is how you baptism, and I mentioned to some of you, I speak in tongues, and some of you, your heart stopped for a second. Ooh. That's not the stuff that we should be freaking out about. The stuff we should be trying to freak out about is, are we loving each other in spite of that? Because he says that's how they're going to know you're mine. Why? Because look at the world. There's groups who are very loving and very nice to everyone else who thinks exactly like them. That's easy. Right? You think like me, you act like me, you believe in the things I believe. Man, I love you. I'll do anything for you. As soon as someone thinks a little differently than you, okay. Kick them out of the circle. And he says, yet for Christians, we're all supposed to get together. And he's sitting there and he's talking to people who are, you got the nation of Israel, and then you got these Gentiles, which I know it doesn't, trying to understand their view of it. That's a big deal for them. As I said, well, cat people and dog people living together. Bear fans, Packer fans, all together. What? Viking fans, I don't know. We're still praying for them, but So there's this idea he talks about. He says, consider therefore in verse 22 the kindness and sternness of God. Sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you will also be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will what? Be grafted back in. So the way God operates is cut off. You think, well, they're done. No. His hope is to still graft everyone back in. That's the heart of God. He says, after all, if you were cut off of an olive tree that is wild by nature, talking to the Gentiles here, and contrary to nature, you were grafted into a cultivated olive tree. So you come from olive tree A, you're cut off there, you're not supposed to get an olive tree B, but yet he makes it so you're grafted into that. He says, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own tree? You see, no one earns their place in God's family. It's all by grace. And we have to remember that. It's not about getting it right. You're not in the family of God because your theology is more right than someone else's. You're in the family of God solely through grace alone. And if we really understand that, it will affect how we treat others, won't it? You might disagree, but you're not putting the pedal down so hard because it's kind of like, well, it's not like if they think my way, that gets them closer to God. It's simply through grace alone. And so he's sitting there explaining this to these Gentiles. You got these Jewish people, and let's be honest, a lot of them are trying to stop what you're doing. You probably think, man, forget those guys. But he's like, hey, they are trying to kill you. It's not great right now, but just know too that God's hope is for them to be reconciled again, which again will affect the way that you view things. And then we see here in the last part of this the real heart of God, the real nature of him, of how he wants everyone to be saved, how his heart is for all of Israel to come back to him. Paul says, I do not want you to be ignorant about this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved, as it is written. The deliverer, I'm having a tough time saying words today. The deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them, when I will take away their sins. As far as the gospel is concerned, he says they are enemies for your sake, and they are. He said, but as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. I'd say that word. Just as you who were at one time disobedient to God have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience, so they too have now become disobedient in order that... so they too have now become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. What in the world is Paul talking about? He talks about this mystery of like, listen, yeah, at this time, they are the ones who are your enemy. And God is using that to bring the gospel to you guys. And his heart is once all the Gentiles and the full amount of the Gentiles has come in, then all of Israel will be brought in as well. See, if you just stop and you just take a look at the picture of what is going on right now, it was very easy for you to say, God is no longer with the Jewish people here. He is not with the Israelites. That's not where he's doing the miracles. That's not where the gospel is being preached and people's lives are being changed. You would think he's not there, and yet he is still there. And his plan hasn't changed. He still has a heart for them. He's still going to bring them back. This is important for us to remember. And we all go through things in our lives. We all go through seasons. And sometimes you might be going through a tough season. You think, God's not here anymore. I feel like my faith isn't like it used to be. I feel like things are different. He's gone. But he's not gone. He's still there. He's still God. What is he leading me through? I don't know. You're confused. You can get with people. You can come in, chat with me. Let's talk about it. But he's still there. It says he's always with you, no matter what you're going through. See, we don't have a God who's a God of just writing people off. We have a God who is painstakingly patient and always waiting for us to come back to him, always waiting for that opportunity where he can just kind of bring folks back. Sometimes you feel away. Why is that? I don't know. We all go through that stuff. Why is that? Why is it sometimes you read your Bible and it's like so clear and so wonderful? And then the next day you go there and it's like, blah, 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 blah. Right? You read like 3 chapters, like, I don't know what any of this said. You know? And I said, for me, I said, I feel like I should be getting something. God, right? You want me to preach this stuff? Why does it feel? I don't know. But then there's sometimes I'll just be in a conversation with someone. And you'll pray with them. And also, ooh, God is there. And other times you get in with people, it's just kind of you're there. And then sometimes you'll be singing and just nothing, worshiping. And then sometimes you worship and you just, whoa. I think part of it is that he always wants us to be searching. He seems to not always be a God of just the same old, same old. Sometimes he's here, sometimes if you feel like he's there, but he's there the whole time. Right? That's why it says, remember when he comes by and it's like he's the quiet wind. He wasn't in the loud thunder. He was just in the gentle breeze. Sometimes you hear him loud, and you'd love it if he'd be loud. right? You ever seen other people who seems like they hear from God every other day? God told me this, God told me that, God told me that. I'll be honest with you, I don't believe you most of the time when you tell me that. God told me this or that. I'm like, okay, let's see. Why? Because I've been in church too long, that's why. And I've heard a lot of ways if Christians have learned that you can't say what they're thinking is wrong, all they have to do is say, God told me. No. It's the ollie ollie oxen free, right? Because what are you going to do? Yeah, God told me I'm supposed to, leave my wife and go shack up with this other lady. I mean, I don't think he did. But no, that's what God told me. Okay, I don't think so, So we got to be careful with that. Sometimes it might just be the pizza you had late last night, and that's not the Holy Spirit talking to you. But we go through things, and they can be difficult, and again, it's Lent is the wonderful time where I get to talk about gloomy things, like, things aren't working in your life, but we need to learn how to embrace those things. I don't think just saying all the time, like, you can tell if God's in your life because everything's going your way. And then if things aren't going your way, well, God's not in your life. I think that's bad theology. Do I pray for God's blessings? Yes. Do I think he wants to bless me? Yes. Do I always feel blessed? No. Does that change the way I love him? No, maybe for a moment. I get bonked on the head like, whoa, what's going on? Why this? What happened? God, we were going in such a great direction. Man, you and me were rocking and rolling. And then I just got punched in the face by life. What in the world? And then I find him through that. And I walk through that. And the weirdest thing, if you've ever been through something like this, and you've walked through some tough things, you ever notice how it changes you in a good way? You can grow closer to him sometime through those tough times and those tough things. You say, well, did he throw that in my way then to mess with me? No, listen, life is just life. I don't think he's out there throwing obstacles in your way. He's probably like, you're pretty good at doing that yourself. That's in my case. Most of my problems are Phil-induced, okay? But he's always there, and he's always helping us through. That's his nature. You see it right here. These were his chosen people. Messiah came through. That's where his son came through this. But even look at the story of how it got there. It's a messy story. Right? You got even David and Bathsheba, right? She's in the line of Jesus, like his great-great-great-great-grandmother. And the only reason she got in the line is because David slept with her, had an affair with her, got her pregnant, and killed off her husband. So then God used that. You think, well, that was supposed to happen? No, I don't think it was ever supposed to happen. Well, then what's going on? What I think it is that no matter what you go through in your life, no matter how much of a mess up you think you are, no matter how much the situation you think is so messed and beyond repair, that he can take whatever is messed up, whatever's so broken, whatever seems so ugly, and turn it into something so beautiful it doesn't make sense. That's the heart of God.